Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Bernie Sanders did an appearance on the Majority Report. He's gone on the Majority Report before, as they mentioned in this interview, but it's been a long time. Probably around the time that he ran his first major presidential campaign in 2016, I assume is when they would have had him on, maybe even before that. It was probably around that time, or maybe close to the 2020 election. That would also make sense. So he went on there to talk about the current state of things. Interesting timing, really, because there's no particular race that's happening, but Bernie Sanders has been pretty focused on this idea of running around the country and trying to sort of rally support with this anti-oligarchy grassroots type of message. And so he still pops out with endorsements all the time. He has endorsed Brad Lander, who is now running a campaign in New York. He is not a DSA candidate, Brad Lander, or necessarily as left-wing as somebody like Zohran Mamdani, but there's still a coalition there. And strategically, Bernie Sanders has endorsed him against Dan Goldman, the establishment candidate. So in races like that, there have been some serious wins in the last year since Trump took power, including Zohran in New York and the mayor in Seattle. There was also a Democratic mayor that just took over in Miami, although I don't believe she's some kind of progressive necessarily. And that is what Bernie Sanders is up against almost just as much as he's up against the establishment of the Republican Party or somebody like Trump, is the establishment of the Democratic Party that wants to protect the corporate and financial interests that Bernie Sanders' policies cut against. And so that's what there is a need for grassroots support and a steady drum of people that are showing up for various causes, elections, and actions in order to get this stuff done. And we're really just at the beginning of any type of movement that is going to come from that. So real quick, let me play for you a couple clips of this interview just to show you how it went. For the most part, this is pretty normal stuff for Bernie Sanders. They try to get him to talk specifically about strategy, like what is the strategy? But I think Bernie, mostly sticks to his message and his talking points, which can be a little frustrating sometimes, but also is what has taken him and his message so far. So here is that interview real quick and a couple of the more interesting parts of it.
From your perspective, and I know in 2016, you entered the race and much of it was like getting money out of politics. The Supreme Court has, as far as I can tell, shut the door on that prospect and very well may be opening it up to even more money going forward. What do you see? Again, this is another sort of like broader question about breaking this cycle. Like, what do you see? Is there a sequence? Like, how do you tackle the oligarchy? Is there anything that needs to come first?
I think, Sam, ordinary Americans, and not just people who are inclined to be Democrats, understand that this country faces fundamental systemic crises, okay? Not small stuff. What does that mean? I mean, it's what my book was about. And by the way, if I may say so, it's a good book. And what it talks about, what we do not as a nation talk about, but people want to hear more about, is the fact that you have a handful, a small number of extraordinarily wealthy people. Elon Musk now owns more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. Now, just deal with that. One guy, more wealth than the bottom 52% of American households. Don't you think that might be a subject of enormous discussion and debate?
Back to just a little bit about where we go in the future with the Democratic Party, I'm encouraged to see there be this coalescing behind the buzzword of affordability. It's the step in the right direction. But oligarchy versus affordability feels like kind of the fault lines here.
Don't be naive on me here. I mean, that's just a poll-driven word. What do you mean?
Fair enough.
What does the establishment mean? Oh, yes,
right.
Trump is driving up prices. Terrible. Vote him out. All right, that's fine. But what do we mean? Its affordability is not just the fact that Republicans are resisting extending the ACA tax credits, which means that premiums are going to, on average, double for 20 plus million Americans. That's a disaster. But when you talk about affordability, you tell me how many establishment Democrats are asking the simplest of all questions. What's the first question you ask about healthcare? Duh. Why are we spending twice as much per person on healthcare as the people of any other major nation? And yet we have 85 million uninsured or underinsured. Is that not the first question you might ask? That's affordability. All right? But that's not quite a question we are happy to ask, because you know what? You're going to start tangling with the insurance companies and the hospitals and the drug companies. So let's stay away from that issue. We'll stay with the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, which is a disaster, frankly. I think what you're asking is how, in fact, do you take on a group like Ellison and Musk and Bezos and these guys combined worth, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. And they start their super PACs, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that has got to be a major political issue. If I'm running for office, I say not only am I not going to take corporate PACs, we got to address the fact that we have a corrupt, and that's the word, campaign finance system. And you want to get my vote, you're running for office, you want to get my vote, you got to have way up on your list of priorities ending this corrupt campaign finance system. Trump, in essence, when he runs for president, says the system is broken and I will fix it, right? Now, you and I know that everything he's doing, or virtually everything he's doing, is making a bad situation worse. But what Democrats try to do is tinker around the edges. If your income is $43,927, you will be eligible for something. It's enormously complicated. You have to fill out 18 pages, but we'll get you that. All right. What we need to say is the system, what I would call uber capitalism, is an incredibly broken system. If you look at the basic necessities of life, health, education, nutrition, housing, we're not doing well. We are doing rather poorly. So we need a radical and fundamental transformation of American society, a government that works for everybody, not just
All
Mr.
right, so
Musk
some stuff
and his
here
friends.
from Bernie about challenging the oligarchy, which is what he has been focused on in the last year or so. It seems like he views the oligarchy as something that has truly coalesced in the post-COVID period. And so focusing on that as a word and a means of radicalizing and galvanizing people seems to be his strategy, and it seems to be working for the most part. The rallies that him and AOC did, as well as some of these elections that they are getting involved in and offering endorsements in, have been pretty strategic and so far have gone pretty well. My thought in general is that this next year is going to determine a lot. It's going to determine a lot for all of us because nobody knows where the economy is going to go. Trump seems to, in response to some of the negative results of some of his policies, to be willing to temper some of those policies, which mitigates some of the negative results, which is a good thing and a bad thing because it mitigates the negative results, but it also gives Trump more of a claim to say that his policies work. Whereas if he institutes the most straightforward version of his policy and causes massive failure, it's clear to everyone that Trump has failed. So how exactly that plays out in the course of the next year, as well as the elections that happened at the end of next year, is going to determine what the strategy looks like, how possible it is to pursue any strategy, and where the movement is in terms of like the Democratic Party, in terms of how strong is this strain of populism and anti-establishment nature within the Democratic Party that could actually like take some power and have a meaningful chance. Because it's obvious, I think, that the only people that are prepared to actually fight Trump or the Trumpism or the oligarchy or whatever is people who are offering meaningful economic change and something bold, a bold vision. That means different things in different places. But there's also a lot of liberals out there and Democrats out there that still aren't ready for that. And what they're desperate for is a messenger that is going to deliver a more tamped down economic vision like Bernie Sanders is referencing here, in place of this actually transformative vision. So they're looking for the person, whether it's going to be Pete Buttigieg or even Jasmine Crockett, the person that's going to stay away from economics other than this buzzword affordability, and instead is going to just attack Trump or try to make it about democracy, American values. That was such a spectacular failure in 2024 that it's hard to imagine that that's the direction they're going to go again. But in as many of these races across the country as possible, they're going to try to win with that strategy. And they have made a little bit of progress. Some of the candidates that have done well in this last round of elections are more just like straightforward Democrats. So there is now some evidence that people are willing to go back to just normal Democrats as opposed to Trump. But that is not a solution for us, because that is not going to change anything. Democrats are not going to meaningfully change the conditions that led to Trump. And if you noticed, the pendulum, when it swung back to the left after Trump the first time, didn't go that far left. A little bit, started to for a second, then got tempered by the system, and then it swung even further back to the right. So we have to prevent that from continuing to happen. And I know there's fear about the upcoming elections and what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. Obviously, Trump and the Republicans are going to try to rig it and do as much fuckery as they can. What I will say almost for sure is that there's going to be elections. The elections are going to happen. And this next year of political whatever happens is going to lead to some kind of election cycle. Is that going to be a rigged election? Is it going to be something that Democrats, get wiped in, or some kind of crazy crisis happens during the election? Maybe it could. But I think what we're likely to see is a highly rigged and extremely suspect, especially when it comes to gerrymandering and in certain cases vote counting, election that's also still highly competitive, because again, Democrats are doing well. So in the meantime, they're going to try to rig things in their favor as much as possible, and I don't know if that's going to be enough to stop what's the inevitable wave of pushback that's going to happen. Now, 2028 is a different story, because especially if Trump loses badly, then he might go crazy. But if Democrats are more empowered in Congress, then that might temper his ability to destroy the entire election system or whatever. So this next year determines a lot. And what I wish we had gotten a little bit more of from Bernie here in this interview is like specifics, like a specific strategy. Because obviously what Bernie's focused on is identifying the candidates across the country that are building this grassroots momentum, giving them some support, trying to uplift them, and trying to tie it all together into kind of a common message. And so far that is working. What I think people are hungry for, though, is a way as individuals to get involved on a daily basis, on a regular basis. Because everybody sees these things happening and sees Trump and other oligarchs going after these fundamental sort of institutions of society and feeling that sense of rage and outrage that something's being taken away from us. And other than, voting or yapping on YouTube, there's not that many ways for the average person to feel like they can get involved and do something. And then you have canvassing efforts and getting involved with certain candidates, raising money for things. That's great too. What I think has helped the Republicans tie their enormously unpopular ideas into this grassroots movement that has helped them out a lot is that they spoke to people on an individual basis, and they created pipelines so that people's individual engagements in politics, even if it's just posting memes online, built towards a sense of real momentum. And that made it so that your average person who's just watching streamers, to that streamer themselves, to the other media figures who might be more or less popular than that streamer, all of them create this sort of like chain reaction, and they lift the same thing, even as they might have disagreements amongst them. And we're seeing that now where they're all starting to fight each other. They still have gotten this far where they've radicalized the whole sweeping section of the country and drag them away from understanding even what the concept of this demagoguery is. They just think the demagoguery is a good thing. They believe all the horse shit about immigrants, and they think that Trump's tough guy warmonger act is like a good thing. And that's the type of, machismo that you need in leadership. There's just a whole huge portion of the country that has been radicalized to that effect. And partially it's because of the tone that's been created that is something that a lot of people can get involved in, and a lot of people's frustrations become channeled through. And so in this next year, I think in order for us to build a movement, the sort of inevitable and unstoppable movement that is needed in order to defeat the establishment, so to speak, of the Democratic Party or just of politics in general, there needs to be a way for anyone from myself to Sam Seder to Bernie Sanders to speak directly to individuals and say, if you do this, if you post this online, if you go to this place and send a fake message, or you send this email that we have formatted for you, then you can be a part of this movement and you can be a part of applying political pressure. And that's what some of the more noxious figures on the right, like Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes, are actually really good at, is encouraging their people to apply pressure through the internet, through phone calls, through whatever means they have. And a unified approach to that, through recognizable memes or recognizable conspiracy theories that then have to be written about in the newspaper because they're having an impact on the way people think. That is the way that, again, these very unpopular ideas have gotten such a foothold in the culture. And so I think the number one change that I would like to see over the next year, other than maybe Trump like withering away and crumbling into dust or something like that, would be I want people on the left to start to reclaim that ground in the public conversation, the public consciousness, because we have the more popular ideas. And they've made way too much progress on issues like immigration, but they can be beat back on that because at the end of the day, the common sense solutions are still the ones that are coming from the left. And the voices are there to communicate that, but they're maybe not harmonizing in the right way or just focused on the right approaches. And so I'm not against electoralism. I think electoralism is smart to keep in mind, but there's also a day-to-day aspect to this, that every day that people continue to go to work and go about their sort of normal schedule without reacting to what's happening around them in politics in some way is a day that the Trump administration is allowed to continue on its power grabs, as well as all the billionaires around it. And so in those individual days, what I would like to hear from people like Bernie Sanders is instructions for people of how they can conduct themselves in a way that's helpful. What can people do in the meantime in their lives, conversations with loved ones, conversations online, conversations at work? What can people do to continue pushing this ball forward? One thing at the workplace would be, talking about unions, just bringing up, your workers' rights, or the fact that you have certain demands in terms of time off or your wages. Talking about those kind of things with people and then tying it back to specifically a left-wing politic so that people can't say, well, I still support Trump because of this and this. To create the understanding that to support Trump and Republicans and even establishment Democrats is to support money coming out of your own pocket and scams that are affecting you directly. And the average person, I think, is primed to understand that. Most people you'll talk to, especially in the working world, they already sort of know that. But the articulation isn't there to bring them to the type of conclusions like Medicare for all, housing for all, arms embargo on Israel, things that do actually have a material effect and cut against the establishment as we know it. People are hungry for that. And so having those type of conversations with people in everyday life and then being able to point towards certain candidates, as distant as those candidates can possibly be from the Democratic Party brand as it's currently known, that's going to be, I think, what's going to help take American politics back in a healthier direction. And as Trump, the last thing I'll mention is Trump is now doing this thing with the ICC, where he and his administration are trying to put pressure on the ICC to change their rules, the International Criminal Court, so that Trump will not be targeted by them after he leaves office. So this is an international body that has the ability to prosecute heads of state for international crimes that otherwise they would not be held accountable for. This court has issued warrants for Benjamin Netanyahu and another official in Israel, And so Trump is saying, not only do we want you to promise not to go after Trump, we want you to drop the investigations and the prosecutions of Benjamin Netanyahu and other Israeli heads of state. So this is now a new step in the Trump power grab, where he is explicitly stepping out of bounds to something that, as America, we do not control. We do not control this International Criminal Court. We also were not part of the body that established it, meaning we're not one of the voting members of this body. And if I'm interpreting correctly, what I think they're trying to get them to do is to say that because America is not a part of the voting body of the ICC cannot try to prosecute an American head of state. I believe that's the way that America wants them to change their founding documents, the documents that undergird the whole concept. America wants them to rewrite what their policy is in terms of why they prosecute people and how. So now Trump is utilizing his leverage on the international stage in the same way that he has utilized it in America to say, I am allowed to get away with more than currently the letter of the law or the quote unquote norms say I'm allowed to do. Is that going to work? I don't know. It doesn't look great because right now there doesn't seem to be any force that's willing to step in to stop Trump. But the further he pushes with stuff like this, the more backlash he's going to create. And Trump or America cannot defeat every country. We could defeat every country individually, every country together, or even a large portion of them. We're not going to be able to win that fight politically or otherwise. So Trump wanting to pick a fight with every European nation, as well as this International Criminal Court that includes every European nation, all of which are keenly aware of Trump's abuses of power. And all of those countries have to vote on this. They can't change the rules unilaterally. It's a matter of the different countries voting on it. So is that going to happen? I don't know. But what I know is that it's an escalation of the power that Trump has and feels like he has, and it's because he's gotten away with a lot so far. Some of it not. Some of it he's gotten pushback on. But he realizes that the only real thing that can stop him on the world stage when it comes to these war crimes that he wants to commit and this war that he wants to go to with Venezuela, the only thing that's really hanging over his head is these international consequences that may come of it. So not only does he want to use it to get his buddy Benjamin Netanyahu off the hook, but also he wants to try to preemptively get himself off the hook, which is exactly what he did in America. And on an individual basis, starting to create the language of resistance to that type of power grab is, I think, what the left needs to be focused on over the next year, so that when this election happens, it can be about not only Trump's abuses of power in America and on the world stage, but going all the way back to the economic and oligarchic issues that have created this problem, and to try to, on a grassroots level, articulate to people that the reason Trump is able to abuse his power in this way is because of the oligarchy that has coalesced around him and the extreme power that he and every other billionaire harnesses. That's the reason that he is able to abuse his power and make your life more difficult. That's the winning message in 2026 and 2028, and the challenge is getting there.
Me too close to, too much to do. The mission is too crucial. Shout it out from the rooftops until I lose vocals. Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity.